You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 24. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Tricorder Transmissions. Another week has gone by, and we are back again. Your host, Jeff Hewlett.
And Craig Cohen. And Jeff, on Twitter the other day, good friend of the show, Guy Hutchinson, who I co-host another podcast with, and who does a ton of great podcasts over at the Adventure Club Podcast Network, including the very, very awesome and quite popular Drunk on Disney, which is a podcast if people haven't checked out, they should definitely check it out. But he sent me a link to a woman who had basically spent $30,000 redressing her house in the style of Star Trek, the original series.
Yep, I saw that link that he tweeted out, and I was taking a look at it, and I came away thinking that $30,000 seems like a small amount to spend on the amount of renovation that they did. I mean, looking at that, I would have thought it would have cost more.
Yeah, so if you go, if you search probably Star Trek house, or if you go to this website, dvice.com, and I'm sure in the show notes we'll include a link as well. But yeah, it does look like they got a lot of bang for their buck. So this first picture we're looking at, it looks like I guess the bed, maybe a guest room.
Yeah, something like that.
The thing I love about this is they have those awesome Star Trek sheets that I talk about every time we see them on an episode.
Yep. They're very, very cool looking. I think they nailed the look of the room, pretty close to. That actually looks kind of like Spock's bedroom.
Yeah, I guess they were. Yeah, they're going for somebody's quarters, I guess.
Yeah, pretty cool looking. I like the that little axe hanging above the bed there, and there's a couple little other accoutrements that are a little tough to see in this picture, but there's like a little shelf behind the pillows there. It looks like there's a couple of items on there. Pretty interesting looking though, and those bed sheets are pretty rad.
Yeah, and before we get any further, the woman who did this, her name is Line Rainville, and apparently this started out as like a home theater project and sort of blew up from there. So let's jump ahead to the next picture and take another look at basically what the transporter.
Yeah, it looks like a transporter. Now I thought that would be really cool if that was your shower.
Right?
Yeah, I mean I would really dig that if that was a shower.
Yeah. And then I guess next we have like a desk area.
Yeah, almost looks like Captain Kirk's little desk in his quarters where he records his logs. Or
oh right, yeah, and it looks like there's a tricorder there, and they have the 3-tiered or the 3-dimensional chess.
Yep. Which
is very cool, and it looks like they have a is that a blue shirt hanging up?
Looks like a blue shirt, and that also kind of looks like one that almost quasi diamond shaped looking thing looks like one of the instruments the space hippies played on the way to Eden. Has a bunch of bells hanging off of it, right?
Yeah, and I also like the pictures they have hanging up. It's almost like these were sort of mementos from their 5-year mission almost.
Oh yeah, look at that. It's pretty cool looking.
So we've also got a bathroom that's got the Starfleet insignia on it. We've got more shots of the bathroom here that just looks amazing.
It does. It has something that I really always wanted in a bathroom, which is one of those walk-in shower areas where they don't actually have a shower door or a curtain. It's just an area you walk into.
Yeah.
And take a shower. It's just nice and open and wide. Someday I'd love to have a shower like that.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. And then also they have, I guess this is a hallway leading into, I guess, one of their rooms, and it's basically dressed like a hallway on the Enterprise. You have some it looks like access panels. You have that door chime that we talked about early on in the series here.
I'm jealous.
And then you have, I guess, their main living quarters, which is the bridge.
Yes, with a cardboard cutout of Spock.
Yeah. And the detail here is pretty nice too. I mean, it would be, I don't know what this woman's plans are now that she's sort of gone viral on the internet, but I wonder if maybe, I know there was somebody God, I want to say maybe the people that own the Simpsons house. Remember that Simpsons house they gave away in the 90s in Vegas?
Vaguely, yeah.
I think like one day a year, the guy that owned that gave a tour. I could be completely wrong. But there's somebody out there that has a house, and one day a year they let people into it.
Yeah.
Darn it. I wish I had done my research.
Yeah.
So we got more shots of the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And the detail there is really great. The kitchen's even, sort of, Star Trek theme with the insignia. And then the dining room table. With, I guess, the what's that, Romulan ale bottle?
That is the Romulan ale bottle and the geometric food shapes.
Yeah. So and then they even got like the food replicator.
Yep.
Yeah, which is really awesome. So if you haven't already, follow the link on the show notes. And I think you're gonna get a kick out of this because I know me and Jeff both had a really really fun time. Just looking at these pictures, and you can spend a couple minutes on each one if you really want to get into it and see what they did. I mean, and you always gotta sort of love the commitment that some fans show for their love of their favorite thing.
Most definitely, yeah. There's some stuff in here that I'm pretty jealous of because I remember when we used to go to the Experience years ago, and I remember when we're waiting in the hallway to get on the rides, I always stood there and thought to myself, how cool would it be to have like one of these hallways like in my house that's modeled after the interior of a Star Trek ship. I thought always wanted to do that, knowing that I probably would never get the chance, but apparently somebody else felt the same way.
Yeah. So very, very cool. Anything else you want to talk about before we get into this side of paradise?
No, I don't think so. Light on the news this week besides these pictures here. So if you want, we can jump right into the air dates.
Perfect.
All right. So this side of paradise aired on March the 2nd, 1967, followed by a remastered version on July 28th of 2007.
All right, cool. And I have a quick summary. The USS Enterprise arrives at the planet Omicron Ceti 3, the site of a colony established in 2264. Unfortunately, the Enterprise's mission is only to catalog its destruction under the bombardment of deadly Berthold rays, which were discovered after the colonists left Earth. Captain Kirk, Commander Spock, Dr. McCoy, Lieutenant Sulu, Lieutenant Desal, and Lieutenant Kelowitz beamed down to the planet's surface and discovered to their surprise that Elias Sandoval and the other colonists are not dead after all.
Pretty cool. That's a very long synopsis for...
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty impressive stuff. So you ready to start it up?
Yes, sir.
All right. We are going to start our scene-specific commentary in 3, 2, 1. All right. Here we are. Ship flying through space yet again.
Who would have thunk
and
it?
Sulu is back on the bridge, finally.
Yeah. And I like how Kirk sort of gets these discs that he...
Yeah. They just hand him these little tapes.
Yeah, he thumbs for a moment, and then they actually show him putting them down, which is...
Yeah. And it's funny, a little reversal of fortune on this episode. Sulu's back, but there's no Scotty. So, what the hell? Why can't we have the whole crew?
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of a important episode from a behind-the-scenes, point of view. So the story editor for the early Star Trek episodes was a gentleman by the name of Stephen Karabatsos. And this episode, this side of paradise, is the first episode where DC, Dorothy, Fontana took over as story editor and also has co-scripting credit on this episode as well.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And how she wound up getting into that position is interesting as well. In the past, we've talked about other episodes where the scripts were not really in good shape by the time it came to shoot them, and this episode is another one of those. And the script, according to the sources I've read, said that the script was in really bad shape and seriously needed to be rewritten because the original writer, Jerry Soule, had not gotten it right, according to Gene Roddenberry. And according to Fontana herself, Gene Roddenberry told her, if you can rewrite this script, you can be my story editor. So kind of neat. So she actually pulled it off. And in the rewrite, one of the big things that changed in Saul's original script, the love story was supposed to be between Sulu and Layla, and DC Fontana rewrote it to be between Spock and Layla. So a big change. And according to this other source that I had read, that Leonard Nimoy was a little bit taken aback by the fact that they were doing a love story for Spock. But he, after the episode was said and done, he said that he thought it turned out to be a really nice story.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a change. Really interesting thing to point out here. We're seeing a landing party that has no red shirts.
I know, that instantly jumped out at me. It something seemed weird from the get-go with the landing party. Just getting back to the writing of this episode. So Jerry Soule was actually credited as Nathan Butler
yeah.
when everything was said and done here. I guess for whatever reason, it might have been the amount of work he felt ended up on the screen after all was said and done.
Yeah. So we found out during the stinger that this planet, where this colony is, has about 150 people, and Spock says that they have no chance of survival because the planet is being bombarded by Berthold rays.
Yes.
And only a limited amount of exposure can be risked. So we're gonna find out a little bit further into the episode that they can stand it for about a week.
Yeah.
Before adverse effects, but somehow these people have survived all of this time, regardless of these Berthold rays. So we're gonna find out at some point how they managed to do that.
Yeah. And this is planet Omicron?
Omicron Ceti 3.
Yeah, which is funny because it made me think of, and I haven't actually done the research, but what was the Transformers homeworld? Unicron?
Cybertron.
Cybertron. And then was there Unicron?
Unicron was the villain from the Transformers cartoon movie.
Okay.
The Planet Eater, voiced by
was that Orson Welles?
Orson Welles.
Yeah, his last role.
Yes. And also, another tie was Leonard Nimoy was actually in that movie as the voice of Megatron's replacement. What was his name? I'm forgetting his name. At any rate, Leonard Nimoy did one of the voices in the movie. My brain is temporarily malfunctioning.
Well, this isn't a Transformers podcast, so it's allowed.
No, it's not. So, one thing I really like about this episode, though, is that it's actually shot on location, and I think it shows. So, we've seen episodes in the recent past, like Return of the Archons, that were shot on back lots and sets that were built. This was shot on an actual farm and actual meadows and pastures. And I think this episode is better for having been shot on location. You can see just in the shots we're seeing now where they're standing with this barn behind them, you can see that this looks so much more realistic than the on-set shots that they've done. So, the white picket fence here is actually a real white picket fence. It's a real farmhouse with a real little porch there.
Yeah.
I think the episode gets a big boost from that, just like Shore Leave did.
Yeah, and I actually think it's kind of neat that they weren't afraid to sort of do both, because I think ultimately it adds to the alien nature of some of the planets that they end up on, and it was it definitely added an otherworldly feel to some of those scenes.
I agree. And something we also missed while we were talking is that when they ran into the colonists, there was some speculation as to how these people were still alive. And Sulu, interestingly enough, speculates that they may not actually be alive.
Yeah.
And McCoy dismisses that with no medical evidence to support his dismissal, despite all of the bizarro things that he's seen so far in the series that we've bore witness to.
Yeah.
You would think he'd be willing to accept strange explanations, like maybe they're actually not real, or maybe they're illusions, or maybe they're actually dead and they're some sort of aliens had taken over. Who knows? But it just, so I thought it was kind of funny that McCoy is still quick to dismiss these strange explanations, and Sulu was so quick to jump to the strange explanation.
Yeah.
So we've also found out now that somehow Spock and this Layla have a history, and which I think, personally, I felt was a nice break from all the chicks being from Kirk's past.
Yeah.
So nice that Spock gets some play for a change.
Yeah. And that's Jill Ireland, who, in addition to having a pretty good career on her own, she's probably most known as being Charles Bronson's wife.
Does she have a death wish? Har har, hardy har har. I
And
love this pose that Sulu
Yeah.
pulls here. What is that about? It's like a modeling shot.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to what you were saying.
No, and I was going to say, they did a series of movies together. They were married in '68, and she unfortunately died rather young at the age of 54 in 1990.
My joke was entirely inappropriate then. I apologize.
I'm sure it's quite all right.
All right. So here's an observation. No animal life on the planet aside from the humans. So no cows, no pigs, no dogs. This is a farm, mind
Yeah.
you.
So
you
what are
would
they
think-
farming?
Yeah, you would think that they'd have some sort of farm animals around. Cows even just for milk purposes.
Yeah.
So they've obviously just been drinking water all this time.
Yeah. This is Frank Overton, who this was actually his last aired appearance. He died a month after this episode aired, after a pretty long career, over 200 performances on TV, including Twilight Zone, Wagon Train, and Bonanza. But he died of a heart attack mere weeks after this aired.
Oh, that's a shame. That's a shame.
One thing that I sort of find interesting about this episode and the Return of the Archons, and you know that this was mainly done for budget reasons, where they would create these episodes where they were pretty much off ship and they were using existing sets and whatnot, is that even in the 23rd century, the look of some of these planets would predate even the time that Star Trek was being filmed. The interior of this place,
Yep.
looks like it could be from the 50s.
Oh, even earlier than
or
that.
earlier than that.
An old style farmhouse.
Mhm.
No, that's an interesting observation. I hadn't thought of that before. So
Even later in the episode, we'll see Kirk packing an old-fashioned suitcase, which,
yep.
The image of the suitcase later on sitting on the transporter, it cracked me up.
yeah, and it's just kind of he puts it on top of the transporter pad,
Like they're going to beam it down.
like they're gonna beam down a suitcase. But some medical observations here from McCoy. He's noticed some strange things when he's been examining the various colonists here. Are those tomatoes growing in the background?
It looks like
Looks like
yeah.
there's a green one back there. Anyway, it seems as if there's some regeneration going on. So everyone is in perfect physical condition, and even people who've had organs removed from their bodies, according to their medical records, their organs have regrown inside them. So
and an appendix that was
Yep.
removed is back.
yep, and some lung scarring
Yeah.
has been healed. So that's very bizarre, very odd. And now we're learning that for a farming colony, they only really have enough crops to sustain the colonists. They're not actually producing more than they need,
Mm-hmm.
which is, draws up another red flag for Kirk. So we're getting a little note from McCoy, actually. I think this is the part where they talk about the regrowing. I jumped the gun a little bit on this discussion. So, yep. So they're talking about the pneumonia and the appendectomy, and so we're going to find out shortly that there are some strange spores on this planet. And in the early drafts, we talked about the script earlier,
Yes.
and in the early versions of the script, the spores were very Borg-like. So they were kind of a communal intelligence, and when an individual was possessed by the spores, that individual was granted some telepathic abilities that allowed them to link up with other possessed minds. Very interesting. And in that early draft, the cure for the spores, the antidote, were people who possessed a certain blood type or the introduction of alcohol into the affected person. And that script originally had a scene in which Kirk leaped onto Spock and forced liquor down his throat to restore him to normal. Can you imagine how awkward that would have been? So I think that kind of casts a little bit of light on how inappropriate the original drafts of the script were and why they needed to be rewritten.
Yeah, it's funny because there's, and I'm sure we'll talk about this when we cover the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, there's always been sort of a debate between Harlan Ellison, who wrote that episode, and Gene Roddenberry when he was alive, that the script that Harlan Ellison turned in wasn't appropriate for Star Trek, and Harlan Ellison, being sort of the cantankerous man that he is, sort of took offense to it, even publishing a book years later, you know, with his original script and his original outlines, sort of proving that his script was fine. But, you know, one thing I've learned doing this podcast with you is that there was no script that was presented to the producers that wasn't sort of revised and, you know, tightened up and, you know, brought into line and go, you know, that also went through network notes. And it's just funny because it sort of changed my perspective on things.
It did to me too. And oftentimes there were this episode is not an individual in this either, is that there are scenes that were in the final script that were actually deleted on set or even filmed and deleted later and replaced with stuff they improvised. So there's a scene coming up here that was improvised and replaced, and this episode is also another one of those episodes where the preview for this episode features a scene that did not appear in the episode proper. So we'll get to that when we get to that very shortly here. But a couple of notes about the actual locations that they shot this in. There's a barn that we've seen that crewman Kelowitz and Sulu investigate that was also seen in several episodes of the TV series Kung Fu.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
So that's pretty cool. And the large open meadow area in some of these sequences was a place called Malibu State Park in Southern California. It's the same spot where the hunt in the cornfield took place in the Planet of the Apes. And was also used extensively in another series that seems to be linked to Star Trek, Gunsmoke.
Ah, cool.
So pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I love this shot, how ominous. You see the stalk of a plant here, and you're seeing Layla and Spock. Layla is kind of leading Spock up to this this plant, promising to explain to him, you know, how they've survived on this planet for so long.
Yeah.
So, and here's a what I think is an iconic scene from the Star Trek universe that has actually made its way into the credit sequences. You know, Spock getting blasted with the spores, and she just kind of looks on.
Yeah, he has an unexpected reaction too.
He does.
This is sort of where we learn that Vulcans truly do have a very, very different makeup than humans.
Yeah, their physiology is quite different.
Yeah, in addition to the pointy ears, they, you know, even though they look like us for the most part, 2 arms, 2 legs, you know, 10 toes, 10 fingers. His response is very much different than they were expecting based on how humans have responded.
Some pretty extreme looking pain, and she's confused by it.
Yeah.
Because she says it didn't hurt them, but Spock, you know, says, you know, I'm not like you, I'm different. But the pain seems to have subsided. And I think it's safe to say that we've seen this in other episodes, and we'll see this again, that emotions in some occasions can cause pain, physical pain to Vulcans. And I think that's what he was expressing here, because he says, you know, he's saying, no, please don't. So the spores are letting him access emotions that he normally heavily suppresses. So we're actually going to hear Spock say, I love you.
Yeah.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did you as a Star Trek fan with, all of your accumulated Star Trek knowledge, so I'm not saying watching this episode in a vacuum, but watching this from the perspective that that Spock's father had married an Earth woman, or a human. It's kind of interesting that that Spock sort of, it seems like Spock was also attracted to humans.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting that the father and the son had the sort of same, same turn-ons, if you will.
Yeah, well, you'll come to find out later on that Spock's father is, Ambassador Sarek, so he has exposure to other races, and Spock, by virtue of being in Starfleet, is also exposed to other races. So maybe that kind of lends itself to the predication of both of them being attracted to human women.
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas normal Vulcans who live on Vulcan don't really get exposure to humans and therefore don't really get the opportunity. Whether or not they would be attracted to humans, who knows? But Spock and his father, look, Kirk's having some hair problems on set. Maybe they didn't bring the makeup people with them. But at any rate, Spock has a very strange reaction. So this is from a person who's watching the show originally as it's aired, this may seem a little bit odd and out of place. And here we're going to see, they're trying to get a hold of Spock. And notice how quick he changes clothes?
Yeah.
Where'd those clothes come from?
I thought Layla had them on hand because she knew that
he was going to want to get rid of his uniform?
Yeah, I think she really, the idea here is to integrate everybody into this society.
I guess so.
It's to assimilate.
But he's still wearing the black undershirt from his blue shirt under that. It's like a onesie.
Yeah, well, I don't think you'd really want to wear that, completely, without some kind of undergarments.
Your chest hairs will get stuck in the zipper.
Yeah.
And it zips from crotch to neck, so there's some chance of getting something else caught in that zipper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's little pockets on the back and some little, like a little half waistband there. I love Spock's answer to Kirk. Yeah, what did you want? I love it. That is spectacular. And Kirk's response is like incredulous. Like, wait, what? Wait, what? Totally unexpected. Kirk, Spock is just being really dismissive. And Kirk is not really, he doesn't really understand. He's never really been in a situation where Spock has acted this way, right?
Yeah.
He's telling Spock that they need to evacuate people, and Spock says, "No, I don't think so. I don't think so. We're not going to evacuate anybody. They're just going to hang out here, fall in love, throw my communicator on the ground. Little disrespect for Starfleet property there. Pretty cool look at the communicator. Have we ever gotten really that good of a look at a communicator yet?
I don't think so.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, we definitely got a pretty clear look at the the face of the communicator. And here we also learn that, based on the fact that the communicator was left open, or, was still transmitting, that you're able to track it.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. So they're going to be able to track down Spock pretty easily. Here we go. Frequency's open. I'll act as a homing device.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So basically, they've been tasked with transporting all these people to another colony, based on the fact that this one really isn't, set up to sustain life.
Well, and they still don't know how they're surviving those Berthold rays.
Yeah.
So this scene originally was a scene with Spock and Layla walking by a stream, but was replaced by the scene with Spock, Leonard Nimoy himself, actually hanging from a tree limb. No stunt double.
Yeah.
It's actually Nimoy himself hanging upside down. I wondered to myself if, since they were on location, is it possible that there were no stunt doubles available and that's kind of why he had to do it himself? Or usually they don't seem to let the actors in this show take any risky moves like the fight scenes usually, the big, the Khan and Kirk scene where they're obviously the stunt doubles are getting tossed around. But I mean, that's pretty precarious position for Nimoy to be in, isn't it? Hanging from a tree like that?
Yeah, but I guess, the thinking back then was he's just hanging from a tree. He's not fighting a tree.
But he could fall and seriously break his neck. Is that the first time he's called him Jim?
It's possible.
I have to review the past episodes. I wonder if that's the first time he's called Kirk Jim. Very interesting.
I'd imagine this was a fun episode for Nimoy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it allowed him to sort of, in addition to explore another side of Spock, it also allowed him to, really emote, which, up until this point in the series, it was something Spock hadn't really been able to do.
Yeah, only in the Naked Time, when he was affected by that virus, the disease that made him act out a little bit. But even then, it wasn't this level of a emotional change for Spock, where he's almost become a hippie human. Now, how did Kirk avoid getting spored in that?
Yeah, I think at first I assumed that he was going to be under the spell as well, and he doesn't actually have anything on him.
There's a couple little spores. I mean, that was a pretty wide shot of spores. I mean, I guess maybe he got lucky and was off to the side a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was it seems like that was the intention, was to have it seem like Kirk missed the spray.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So this episode has a lot of cool sort of shots. We had, the ominous plant earlier, and we had a zoom in when Spock was on the tree. Episode was directed by Ralph Senensky, who is still alive today at the ripe old age of 90 years old. And he would go on to direct 7 episodes total, including Metamorphosis, Bread and Circuses, Obsession, Return to Tomorrow, Is There in Truth No Beauty, and The Tholian Web.
Oh, wow.
And he started out in theater and directed TV as well, including Dr. Kildare, The Twilight Zone, Route 66, and The Fugitive. So,
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned that, because the Tholian Web has a little connection to this episode that I will bring up at the end, as an aside note here. So,
neat.
Remind me to bring that up at the end of the episode. I have something that I want to present to you as an interesting eye-opener.
Oh, cool.
So now we know that McCoy has been beaming up the plants to the Enterprise, and the people on board the ship have now been affected by the spores as well. So it seems that Kirk is the only person who is not affected yet by these spores.
And Uhura has done some serious damage. She
Yep.
basically disabled all communications except from ship to planet.
Which is interesting that she can do that by shorting out something on the... Is this the most uniformed crew members we've seen in one shot before? I'm wondering.
I think the only time we might have seen more was either at the one wedding we saw.
Ah, yeah.
And also the Conscience of the King when they're watching the play.
Right. Good call. Good call.
But short of counting, I would say that this probably beats out the other ones by maybe 1 or 2 people.
Kirk just said, and it's an important thing to remember for my my something that I'm going to talk to you about later. Kirk just said this is a mutiny. So remember that.
Yeah.
And he will officially record this as a mutiny, despite the fact that they're under influence by spores. But just remember that. So, you know what? Another question I wanted to ask you. Why does McCoy suddenly have a southern accent when he gets taken over by the spores?
It seemed to me like, I guess McCoy has some kind of southern heritage that he had been suppressing for some reason.
I guess.
And that this new state of mind sort of made him either less self-conscious about his accent, or just had him resort to an accent that he had slowly lost over time.
Well, maybe.
But either way, I loved it. I think his delivery is great. It's got a really, really cool, relaxing sort of tone to it.
Yeah, now he's a country doctor. He really is a country doctor. He said that when I was an actual country doctor, and he just said he just referenced a cold Georgia style mint julep. Have you ever had a mint julep?
Not that I can recall.
I have had them. They're actually pretty tasty.
Yeah.
They're pretty tasty. But a mint julep contains bourbon whiskey. And we're going to learn now that Spock says McCoy went off to create something called a mint julep. Where's he going to get the bourbon whiskey from? Is he going to have it replicated and beamed down from the ship?
You don't think they have a distillery on that planet?
Heck no. A distillery to make bourbon.
Do you think McCoy might have a little flask?
Of Romulan ale, maybe. I don't know. Interesting. I was just wondering. I mean, you think about it.
Could he have made a virgin mint julep? Or at that point, is it not a...
Wouldn't taste like a good old Georgia-style cold mint julep.
Well,
and plus, where's he going to get ice?
Yeah.
They've got no electricity.
Yeah. He had to have used the ship's resources.
I'm sure he did. But at any rate, that was just something that kind of stuck out to me.
So we're basically getting now, Kirk's getting the hard sell about, the benefits of sort of joining the collective. And I like Kirk's stance here where he says, if man has no wants or incentives, he becomes stagnant. Mm-hmm. So, Kirk's view of humanity is very much in line with lots of other people's, and his own personal philosophy is that you should continually be striving to move forward. Which
yeah, I guess.
And here's a really, really cool sort of ominous, creepy shot where we get the abandoned Enterprise bridge.
Mm-hmm. And you know why this is significant?
Why is that?
That was the only usable empty shot of the bridge, and it wound up being reused for the Next Generation episode Relics when they needed to do a simulation of the bridge, and it was looped several times and blue screen behind James Doohan and Patrick Stewart's scene.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So this episode will be reused.
I'm going to have to go and watch that episode.
I'm sure we'll cover that episode later on
as
well because of its attachment to the original series. But pretty cool that this particular shot, I mean, you don't see an empty bridge. Yeah. So what they had before Kirk enters from the elevator, they had that couple seconds of the empty bridge with the lights flashing that they used in a loop. Pretty neat.
Yeah, that is.
And this is probably the single most depressing captain's log that Kirk has ever recorded. He's very downtrodden. He's talking about how lonely it is on the ship with nobody there. Here he is. Captain's log stardate 3417.7. Good to remember those dates too for later.
Yes.
Except for himself. Yep, there's nobody on the ship. So Kirk is now the only person on the Enterprise. And they've mutinied. Mm-hmm. He has officially recorded mutiny on the log. So remember that.
Yes.
So he's kind of giving a little recap. Communications console is now shorted. He can only contact the planet. He can't pilot the ship, but the orbit can be maintained. So he's pretty screwed.
Yeah.
He can't pilot it alone.
Yeah, they can orbit for months, though.
Looked like somebody wasn't properly focusing that camera as they zoomed in. It got a little soft until it got close. But now, look at this scene. There's nothing on that bridge, right?
Yeah.
Nothing. But wait a minute. There is something on that bridge. And it seems like it should be in this shot. Seems to me that it would show up in this shot.
Yes,
especially with the lighting, the way the lighting is, the shadows are cast behind Kirk. So if the plant was in front of that console, you would have seen its shadow on the floor in that wide shot.
I kind of like the fact that the log was always sort of used as a device to allow these voiceovers. Mm-hmm. But I really enjoy the times where we actually see him recording the log.
There it is.
And Yeah, we definitely should have seen that plant with the spores.
Oh, absolutely. But speaking of the captain's logs, I when I was younger and watching these in syndication, it didn't really occur to me the purpose that they served until later on, and I got a little older. The captain's logs were a great way for people who just tuned in during a commercial break to recap what had happened during the previous section of the show that they may have missed. Or it's a great way for somebody to kind of catch up if they weren't really paying much attention. They can listen, oh, okay, and it kind of gives it grounds the viewer as to where they are in the plot line of the episode. There's that suitcase you were talking about.
Yes.
And he's packing his dress uniform.
Yeah.
And an extra yellow shirt.
Yeah, you'd think he wouldn't need any of that. He would just need the the onesie that he would get when he beams down.
Yeah, and for people who are watching along with this, Kirk's gonna open up this little safe here. These buttons make some real bizarre noises. It's like it's real strange sounds. So you would wonder why they would make those sounds in the first place. He's getting some commendation out of there, and he's gonna open up a box that has a medal in it with the colors of the U.S. flag on it, strangely enough. And it looks like there's some sort of an angel, a winged angel on there. And he has an emotional, almost visceral reaction. He slams it closed, throws it on the table, and gets up and walks away. And places his bag squarely on the transporter, which is turned off, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not on. Nothing's on, which is strange. You don't really see that either.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there was a point with the transporter where, I mean, the transporter just got a serious workout.
Mm-hmm.
It beamed down the entire ship.
But 6 people at a time? 5 people at a time?
I wonder if the transporter was on any kind of maintenance schedule.
You would have to wonder.
Mm-hmm. No. And I also like the fact that I guess the transporter had some kind of automated feature that would have allowed Kirk to beam himself down.
That's debatable because sometimes on some episodes you'll see people who can set it and run over it and beam themselves out, and then other times they'll say that it needs a person to operate it. So I think that was up to the person who wrote the episode.
Yeah, I never liked the the automatic transporter. I think it took away way too much from the engineer who was operating it.
Yeah.
But
perhaps.
Yeah.
So now
Kirk has learned that anger helped him defeat the hypnotic pull of the spores.
And why is he the only person out of 430 who got angry at any point so far after they've been taken over by the spores? You would think somebody else would have some sort of a reaction to it.
Well, I guess down on planet there might not have been as much to annoy you.
Well, I mean, the other people are all waiting in line to get on the transporter. Maybe they're impatient. They want to get down there. They're like, come on, get out of my way.
Yeah, but I think there might have been sort of a group, solidarity there where everybody was just sort of chill. And it took the isolation to really bring that out of Kirk to the surface.
But you have to think from a scientific standpoint that it's not necessarily anger that would kill. Emotions can't kill an infection. It would have to be some sort of physiological thing that happened in your body, maybe a heightened level of heat in your body. When you get angry, you get heated up, or increased blood flow, or something that would kill them as a result of you getting angry, right? I mean, I don't think, you yelling is going to kill some spores that are in your body. That just seems a little strange to me. Mm-hmm. But I love the ruse. Kirk gets Spock to beam up.
Yeah.
And he's got this metal bar, this nondescript metal bar in his hand, and he's like wielding it like he's gonna smack Spock across the face with it.
Yeah. I like how Spock sort of doesn't really take offense to the half-breed comment. He says it's somewhat accurate. But Kirk keeps sort of equating him to a computer.
Mm-hmm. This is also... Is this the first time that we've heard an actual description of Spock's physical strength? Because Kirk actually says before this that, he's going to provoke Spock into a fight, essentially, and he knows that he's no match for Spock because Spock is he has such physical power, and this is going to be a real demonstration of his actual physical power more, on a level that I don't know if we've seen before this. I don't think we've seen something this extreme. we've seen him, Vulcan, nerve pinch people, and we've seen him punch somebody, and we had a little altercations here and there, but nothing to the extent of what we're about to witness. And Spock is obviously getting steamed right here, and Kirk is egging him on and trying to build up that anger to cure him. Interstellar racism in a way.
Yeah, I mean, he really throws everything at Spock.
Yeah,
he basically calls the Vulcans a race of traitors.
Right next to the dog-faced boy. And here we go. Bends that metal like nothing.
And we're going to see some stunt doubles at play here.
Yep. Breaks a hole in the... That's definitely not Nimoy.
Yeah.
That is definitely not Nimoy.
Yeah.
And and a nice fade to commercial as Nimoy's got a little stool or a table. He's about to smash it on Kirk. And he wakes up just in time. Little comedy. Had enough? I love how Spock bends the metal bar in Kirk's hands just by hitting it with his fist.
Yeah. That shows a pretty impressive strength on Kirk's part as well.
I agree.
Because you'd think the impulse would be to drop it or to let go of it.
But he's still holding. I mean, you have to have a good grip on that for the metal to bend, and Spock's arm to and not actually have it fly out of your hand. And Spock, the spores are gone. He actually almost seems disturbed by the fact that he's not a victim of the spores anymore. He's now back to regular old Spock. And he does not seem happy about it.
Yeah.
Which, we should expect that he wouldn't be happy about it. But he almost seems upset.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now Spock is kind of calling into question, how are you going to have a 500-man brawl that's going to cure everybody? So Kirk comes up with an interesting idea. He's going to rig up some sort of a device that's going to allow them to use the communicators to apparently annoy people. Kind of like what would the Naked Time, where the what's his name was singing from the engineering section, annoying everybody on the ship.
Yeah,
pretty cool. So you think about what the spores do to you. They make you really happy. And they medically cure you of every possible problem in your body, right? So what was the big deal in Star Trek Insurrection about the Fountain of Youth? They already had it.
Yeah.
They had the spores here, right? I mean, that kind of totally invalidates Starfleet going to such great length to take over that planet in Insurrection when they could have just grabbed some of these plants. And anybody that needed any sort of a serious medical thing they couldn't cure, to spray them with the spores. They're happy and they're cured.
Yeah. Believe me, if there's any reason not to have Star Trek Insurrection, I'm all for it.
Well, there you go. I just gave you another really good reason. You do not need anything that happens in that movie. All you need is the spore plant, and they'd be perfectly cured. So, here's another thing. Layla just said she'd never seen a starship before. How'd she get to that planet? They all came in a starship.
But she might have been beamed onto the starship and beamed off.
Well, and she's seen the inside of one.
Yeah, but that's different than seeing the outside of one. I mean, you're on a starship. You're on, you could be anywhere.
Come on, man. Come on. So, I don't know. Kind of funny. But, there's some interesting stuff that goes on here, that we didn't talk about. There's a little comedic moment when Spock was saying to Kirk after they had their little fight that, hitting or striking a superior officer is a court-martial offense. And then Kirk kind of plays it off by well, if we were both locked up in the brig, then, who would create this device that we need? And it was kind of a funny moment. So more humor that's getting injected into these episodes, and you kind of have to know the characters.
Yeah.
To really understand the jokes or really find them as funny. Here she is, and she's going to be able to detect the fact that he's not of the body.
Yeah.
anymore. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
He doesn't belong.
He doesn't belong. Different.
You're no longer with us.
Yeah, you're no longer with us. He's not, yeah. And she, yeah, and he really seems remorseful over this. Like, there's a part of him that he's now able to suppress again.
Yeah.
That maybe he really does have some kind of feelings for this girl. Right? And she's even trying to say you can come back and we'll just spray you with some more spores and you'll be right back in the swing of things again.
Yeah. But I kind of like the idea that Spock says, I can't willfully, he says I can't. And what he really means by that is I can't willfully allow that to happen to myself. Yeah. It's one thing if it's sort of a fluke or if I'm led into it, but I can't consciously go in there and allow that, to happen to me.
Well, she just said she told him that she loved him 6 years ago on Earth. So that shows that she had to be on a starship to get to that damn planet. Now, she's seen a starship from the outside and the inside, so that line is ridiculous to me.
What if she was an anxious traveler and had decided to be sedated?
Why isn't she sedated now? She's on a starship again.
Well, she's not traveling, light years upon light years to go somewhere.
Well, she's still in a starship. She's in orbit. She's far above. I mean, if anything happens, she's
But they're not at cruising speed.
I don't think that would make a difference.
I don't know. I'm gonna go with the anxious traveler who was sedated theory.
Okay.
Until somebody can prove me otherwise.
All right. We'll just keep making up theories. And I'll shoot holes in them.
That's a valid theory, though.
All right. If you say so. Is this scene the first explanation from Spock that his name, his real name, his first name is unpronounceable?
Yes. And I think it's funny because his dad doesn't have a challenging name. Or though I guess Spock's not his last name.
No, because his father's last name is Sarek, right? Ambassador Sarek, was that his first name?
That's what I mean. So are these humanized versions of a more complex name?
They must be. Here's another instance of Star Trek fans listening to this show and wanting to shoot both of us for not knowing these things. But so she's now been freed of the spores because she had negative emotions. Spock made her cry. That unfeeling, horrible man that he is. Lovely shot of the interior of a console on the bridge here, isn't it?
Yeah, the communications console's guts. And they're basically rigging it to, it's going to be transmitting a signal that isn't really heard. It's more felt. It's like a dog whistle for humans.
And we're going to see some little fights breaking out here.
No stunt work here either.
No. Oh, Sulu hit him in the leg with a shovel. Whoa. Whoa. That is a hell of a... Wow.
Yeah. And no stunt performer. That was all a continuous shot.
Wow. And look at this. And you see that there's plants all over the place. Yeah, more brawls breaking out as this sound is affecting everybody. These are more like random crewmen.
Yeah.
We don't know who these guys are. They're just random guys. And McCoy's got his mint julep. Oh, for the love of God.
Yeah.
And he's chewing on some grass.
One thing I like about this episode is the fact that the main villain doesn't really have a serious motive. It's a plant.
And a pretty much benevolent plant.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of sort of a neat, a neat device because, a lot of times you need a strong villain to really drive a story. But here they were able to do it with a really sort of passive, antagonist.
Well, I guess the villain in this situation is the situation itself.
Yeah.
That's the evil. And now McCoy is cured quickly and drops his highly sought after mint julep on the ground after taking mere sips.
Yeah.
And Sandoval himself is now cured as well after being jawed and floored by McCoy. Yeah. No accomplishments, no progress. So, that kind of bothers me that that they're considering the fact that they've quote unquote made no progress means they haven't done anything and they're not valid human beings in a way, right? It seems silly to me. They've existed, they've farmed, they just because they've established a little colony there. It's not like they didn't do anything at all. And
they did the bare minimum, though. They weren't even producing more food than they needed.
I mean, come on. How many people in this world do the bare minimum? You know what I mean?
Well, that might have been part of the commentary of this episode.
I don't know. What do they expect? I mean, what do they expect? In 3 years, they've built a farm, they've built houses, they've tilled some fields, they've got some crops going. That's actually pretty good progress for 3 years, I think.
Mm-hmm. But that's all they were going to do.
Yeah, well, they wanted to establish a colony. They did it. Done.
They hadn't set up any social clubs.
How do you know? They probably had social clubs. We just didn't see them. What else do they do? They can't farm when it's nighttime. They got to do something else.
So either way,
bridge club.
Yeah, their false paradise has been destroyed.
Yep.
And they're all being transported off planet.
Yep. So we're wrapping it up.
Mm-hmm.
At
this point, unless you have anything else, I guess we'll start to talk about the essential nature of this episode.
Why don't we do the essential stuff, and then I have my little bit that I'm going to present to you.
Oh, yes.
That is not directly related to this episode, only tangentially.
Yeah.
So we'll do our essential talk, and then I have a minute or two of material that I want to discuss with you.
All right. I'm going to make this short and sweet. I'm going to say that the only thing that makes this essential for me would be some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. But since we're not basing our essential nature of the episode on what was going on behind the scenes and the historic nature of this being, the first episode where DC Fontana was story editor, I'm going to say there's really nothing on this episode of, I don't think Spock's past relationship is enough to make this essential to me. So I'm going to say, unless you can prove otherwise, there's really nothing here that makes this an essential episode for me.
I'm going to agree with you on that, and I'm going to say for all the same reasons. I mean, it's great that we have this cool behind-the-scenes stuff, and it's nice to see that Spock has a little bit of a past, but not enough to put it over the edge as an essential episode. So, yet another double non-essential episode.
Yes.
So, I have something that I want to discuss with you. During my research on this episode, I stumbled across a continuity issue that really opened my eyes, and I kind of got a WTF, and I really am kind of beside myself because this is something that I didn't want to have to happen to my own mind and my Star Trek continuity. So,
oh no, I don't know if I want to be exposed to this.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes, you do. So remember earlier when Kirk officially logged this as a mutiny.
Yes.
Right? So this is recorded as a mutiny on the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This episode happened on 3417.3 was the first log date. So it was in 3417 that this episode occurred. Now, remember the Tholian web that I was talking about?
Mm-hmm.
In the Tholian web, Chekhov asks Spock if there has ever been a mutiny on the Enterprise. Spock says there has not been, despite the events of this episode, which were specifically called out as a mutiny, right? Mm-hmm. So Chekhov is on the ship for the Tholian web. By this continuity problem, right? Chekhov was on the ship for the Tholian web, but not on the ship during this episode. Okay?
But no, how do we know that, though? Because he was on the ship for Space Seed, even though we didn't see him.
But here's the problem.
Okay.
Space Seed occurred.
Oh, Stardate-wise.
Space Seed occurred on 3141.9.
So before this.
Prior to this.
Yeah.
So if Chekhov was on the ship
he
for
would know there was a mutiny.
Yeah.
So
unless it was somehow retroactively, dismissed after the fact. Kirk says special circumstances.
I don't know, man. This is looking a little bit tough for the Chekhov was on the ship but not part of the regular crew during Space Seed, making Khan recognizing him in Wrath of Khan acceptable.
Yeah.
So this kind of shoots a little hole or two in. I was going by that all these years thinking, okay, Khan ran into him in the hallway, Mr. Chekhov, now I know you. But I'm telling you, I'm having a hard time now because I know I have, in my mind, I'm thinking Chekhov would know about this incident had he been on the ship for the Space Seed episode in 3141.9, was not on the ship for this episode in 3417. So I don't know. It's a tough one for me.
Yeah. Well, that's always bothered me about The Wrath of Khan. As much as I love that movie, the sort of retconning of Chekhov into that episode, always bothered me. So
bothered me too, but I always explain it this way.
Yeah. That is a nice little bit of research you did and dot connecting, and I applaud you for presenting your case the way you did.
Thank you very much. I had to go. When I saw that link between this and the Tholian web, I thought to myself, I was praying that the star date for Space Seed was after the star date for this episode, so that it would take that out of the equation. But unfortunately, the star dates are sequential. So at any rate, that was my little presentation, and I guess we'll wrap it up. If anybody has any comments about that, I would really love to hear somebody present a case that would dismiss this so that I can go back to thinking that Chekhov was on the Enterprise during Space Seed.
Yeah. So
hit us up on Facebook.
Yeah.
At facebook.com/tricordertransmissions, the Tricorder Transmissions, or on Twitter at TTT_pod. Anything else from you?
No. This was a fun episode to talk about, even though we deemed it non-essential.
Yes, it was. Right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
What was originally written by Jerry Soule was not what eventually ended up on the screen. In his initial script, called The Way of the Spores, the central figure who finds love with Leela was actually Mr. Sulu, not Mr. Spock. In his early drafts of the scripts, the spores were agents of intelligence. When one was a host to these spores, one received telepathic capabilities. In her rewrite, D.C. Fontana took the core of a wonderful story and enhanced it. By switching the key character from Sulu to Spock, she gave the Vulcan a chance to feel emotion, making the script even more poignant. And instead of having the spores hiding out in a cave, she sprinkled them around the entire planet, enabling them to infect anyone who walked by.